I never thought I'd be writing something like this, but I guess life has a cruel sense of humor. For context, I, 38M, have been married to my wife, 35F, for almost 10 years. We met young, built a life together, and I thought we were a team. I come from a business background, and over the years I've managed to build a company that's done very well. To put it in perspective, I own 90% of the shares, and the last valuation was around $157 million. I never flaunted my wealth, but I've always made sure my wife had everything she wanted. Luxury vacations, booked without hesitation, dream cars, delivered to our garage. She once mentioned wanting to throw a lavish milestone birthday party for herself, something extravagant, something she could show off to her colleagues and friends. I thought it was a little over the top, but she was excited, and I wanted her to be happy. So I footed the entire bill: the venue, catering, champagne fountains, live band, decorations, and even an international trip afterward for her and her closest circle. In the weeks leading up to the party, I started noticing she was distant, brushing off conversations, constantly on her phone, telling me she was busy with work. But she's always been career-driven, so I didn't think too much of it. In hindsight, that was my mistake. The night of the party, I had to stay a little late at the office. Nothing major, just wrapping up a deal that had been in the works for months. I texted my wife that I might be a bit late but would be there to celebrate. She didn't reply, which I assumed meant she was busy entertaining guests. By the time I arrived at the venue, the parking lot was surprisingly empty. I thought maybe the party had moved inside or shifted to the after event. As I approached, I noticed groups of people leaving, laughing, whispering. Some of them gave me looks, pitying, mocking. I even overheard one of her co-workers chuckle. Classic, always showing up late. I walked in just in time to see my wife, holding hands with her office lover. They walked out together like they owned the place, like I didn't exist. I froze. My stomach dropped. She saw me, smirked, and said, "Oh, didn't you get my text? You weren't invited." Then she laughed. He laughed. Guests around them laughed. It felt like the world was caving in around me. I was the fool who paid for every last detail of that circus. And somehow I wasn't even welcome at it. I can't even describe the humiliation. The sting of betrayal hit harder than anything I've ever felt. I expected anger, maybe even yelling, but instead I felt quiet, hollow. I turned around and walked out without saying a word. On the drive home, numbness turned into clarity. I realized I didn't need to shout or fight or give her the satisfaction of a scene. The best way to respond was in silence, but with action. The first thing I did was call the bank and cancel every payment linked to the event. Catering, entertainment, travel agency, hotel bookings, all of it. I called my assistant and told him to block any pending transactions for my wife's luxury purchases. The after-party trip she had planned for herself and her friends. Gone. The designer jewelry order she had on hold, canceled. Then came the bigger move. My wife and her lover's company had benefited massively from my investments. They loved flaunting the fact that they had big backers and used that leverage for influence in their industry. What they didn't expect was for me to pull every cent of my 90% shareholding overnight. One signature, one phone call to my legal team, and $157 million worth of backing was off the table. Just like that. She wanted me excluded from her little birthday fantasy? Fine. I'd exclude her from the world she thought she ruled. By the time I got home, I sat in silence on my couch, staring at my phone. Within minutes, it started buzzing nonstop. At first, I ignored it. But then the number of missed calls kept climbing, 20, 50, 80. By the time I finally glanced at it, I had over 120 missed calls and texts blowing up my screen. Some were from her, some from friends, some even from numbers I didn't recognize. The messages were frantic. Please, answer, we need to talk. You can't just walk away like that. It's not what it looks like. Please, Please pick up. I didn't reply. I didn't call back. And then the knock on my door came. Slow, desperate at first, then more frantic. I sat there, not moving, just staring at the door. I knew exactly who it was. I could practically hear the muffled voice calling my name, and that's where I'm stuck right now. Do I open the door and listen to whatever excuses or lies are about to come out of her mouth? Or do I let her rot outside, finally experiencing a fraction of the humiliation she put me through? Update 1. When I wrote my first post, I ended with someone banging at my door. Most of you guessed it was my wife. You were wrong. It was her best friend. Let's call her Maya. I've known Maya almost as long as I've known my wife. She was always around. Brunches, double dates, vacations. At times, she felt more like a sister-in-law than just my wife's friend. When I opened the door, she looked pale and shaken. She stepped inside without waiting for an invitation and said, "You have no idea what you just did, do you?" I just leaned against the wall and folded my arms. I wasn't going to give anything away. According to Maya, the moment I walked out of that venue, the house of cards collapsed. First, the vendors. The catering manager came up to my wife mid-toast and informed her that their payment had been declined. Apparently, the transaction reversal happened almost instantly when I called the bank. The live band stopped playing because they hadn't been paid either. One by one, services began shutting down. The bartenders walked out. The DJ packed up. Guests who had been promised all-night entertainment and an after-party in a luxury suite suddenly realized they were stranded at a dry, half-empty hall. Some of them had already been boasting about the upcoming trip abroad that my wife had planned, only to be told that the travel agency had pulled the plug. Their exclusive vacation was canceled before it even started. I wasn't there, but Maya painted the picture vividly. My wife standing in the middle of the room, champagne glass in hand, trying to laugh it off while vendors argued with her and guests started leaving. She'd gone from the queen of the evening to the woman everyone whispered about in less than an hour, and then, the cherry on top, her lover. When the news hit that I had pulled my company shares, it didn't just affect me or her. It sent ripples straight through his career. He works in the same industry, and for years he had been bragging about how he was set for life, thanks to being connected to me through my wife. He'd made it no secret at the office that he was climbing the ladder on her coattails. Co-workers, who once tolerated him, started whispering that he'd used her. Without my backing, his company's projects were suddenly frozen. Clients pulled out. Investors panicked. He was exposed for what he really was, a parasite. Maya said the look on his face when the news dropped was priceless. He went pale, mumbled something about needing to make calls, and slipped out. He didn't even say goodbye to my wife, just vanished. Maya admitted that at first my wife tried to keep up appearances. She laughed, waved it off, told people it was just a technical glitch. But as the hours went on, it became obvious that it wasn't. Everyone knew whose name was on the payments, whose name was on the business shares, whose money made all of it possible. And it wasn't hers. She'd built her entire social image on my foundation, and I had just pulled the ground out from under her. By the time Maya left the venue to come find me, my wife was in tears, begging vendors to please give her until tomorrow, while guests streamed out whispering about her downfall. The lavish party she had spent months boasting about ended in complete humiliation. While Maya talked, I stayed quiet. She kept saying, "She messed up, but don't do this to her. Don't ruin her completely." I just nodded and walked her to the door. The truth is, I hadn't said a single word to my wife since that night. I hadn't answered a call, hadn't replied to a text, hadn't opened a single message. And I didn't plan to. There's a special kind of satisfaction in silence. Every time my phone buzzed with another missed call, I imagined her squirming. Every time an email popped up with urgent in the subject line, I imagined her pacing. She wanted me excluded from her birthday? Fine. Now she was excluded from my life. And the best part? I hadn't lifted a finger beyond a few phone calls. The dominoes were falling all on their own. The next morning, I woke up to a delivery at my door. It wasn't flowers. It wasn't a gift. It was a thick envelope. Inside were divorce papers, I won't lie. Seeing them stung. I knew things were broken, but to see her push for it so quickly, part of me wondered if this had been her plan all along. Maybe she thought she could humiliate me, take her office boy toy, and then take half my assets in a divorce. If that's what she expected, she was about to be very disappointed. But the real kicker was what else was inside the envelope. A handwritten note. The handwriting I knew so well. Pages of it. Desperate, messy, smudged with what I think were tears. The first line made me laugh out loud. Please don't do this to me. I can explain. Explain what? That I wasn't invited to my own wife's birthday party? That she paraded her lover in front of everyone while I was the one paying the bill? That she built her throne on my back and thought I'd never move? She wrote about how it was just a mistake, how she didn't mean for things to go that far, how she still loved me. She begged me not to pull out of the company, not to cut her off socially, not to abandon her. Every word reeked of desperation, not love, not regret, just fear. Fear of losing the lifestyle, fear of losing the status, fear of being nothing. I still haven't replied. I don't think I will. Reading through her note, I realized something. She never once apologized for what she did, not once. There was no, I'm sorry for humiliating you, or I regret betraying your trust. It was all about her. Her image, her money, her comfort. I think the part of me that loved her died at that party the moment she smirked and said, "You weren't invited, so now I'm sitting here, divorce papers on my table, wondering if I should just sign them and be done. Or if I should let her sweat a little longer, watching everything she thought she had slip through her fingers. Either way, she's already lost more than she realizes." Update 2, 1,500 words. Her complete collapse. When I left off, I had just received the divorce papers along with her handwritten, "Please don't do this to me" note. I let them sit on my desk for a few days, untouched, not because I was hesitating, but because I wanted her to sweat. And sweat she did. Divorce proceedings. Begin. When I finally called my lawyer, I didn't hold back. I wanted the best of the best. I handed him the envelope and said, "I don't want her walking away with a dime she didn't earn." Luckily for me, the groundwork had already been laid years ago. We had a prenuptial agreement, one she'd signed without hesitation when we got married. At the time, she brushed it off, saying, "Oh, don't worry, I'll never need this. We'll be together forever." The prenup was ironclad. Everything I had before the marriage, everything I inherited, every share and investment I'd built, all of it was protected. The only thing she could possibly claim were minor assets accumulated during the marriage. Compared to the empire she thought she was entitled to, it was pocket change. When my lawyer explained this to her attorney, the response was silence. My wife had walked into this thinking she'd take me for half my worth. Instead, she realized she'd be walking away with barely enough to rent a modest apartment. That's when the smear campaign began. She started telling anyone who would listen that I was abusive, controlling, and cold. She spun the narrative that she had been trapped in a loveless marriage with a man who used money to control her life. She told friends, colleagues, even some family members that I was cruel and that the affair had been a cry for help. For about a week, I'll admit. People bought it. I started getting awkward phone calls from relatives, judgmental looks from people I'd known for years. But here's the thing. When you try to play dirty against someone who documents everything, you lose. I had receipts. I still had the text messages she'd sent to her lover, the ones where she bragged about how he'll never find out and how she couldn't wait to humiliate me by flaunting her new man. I had financial records showing every cent I'd spent on her while she was siphoning money into secret accounts. I had photos, screenshots, and even mutual friends willing to testify about how she'd been openly mocking me behind my back. So I started leaking. Not everything, not all at once, just enough. A screenshot here, a financial record, there. People started to realize she was lying. Public opinion flipped on her almost overnight. The poor, abused wife narrative crumbled, replaced with the truth. She was a cheater who had tried to destroy her husband and failed spectacularly. And as for her office lover, he vanished. The man who once paraded around the office, bragging about how he'd made it thanks to her, was suddenly nowhere to be found. Rumors spread that he'd already moved on, that he was seeing someone else, this time another woman in the company with actual connections. Her co-workers told me he had always been using her, milking her for access to me, for status, for perks. Once the perks dried up, so did his love. He left her just as quickly as he'd appeared. So there she was, jobless, friendless, broke, and dumped. Eventually, she begged for a face-to-face meeting. At first, I ignored her, but part of me wanted to hear what excuse she could possibly come up with. So I agreed to meet her at a neutral spot, a quiet cafe we used to frequent back when things were good. She walked in looking nothing like the woman I married. The perfectly polished queen bee was gone. She was disheveled, eyes red from crying, hands shaking as she sat across from me. The moment she opened her mouth, she broke down. Tears poured down her face as she choked out, "It was a mistake. I didn't mean to humiliate you. Please, we can fix this. I still love you. I was stupid. Please don't throw this all away." I let her talk, let her cry, let her beg. When she was done, I leaned in and said quietly, "You didn't just humiliate me. You destroyed every bit of trust I had in you. You didn't just make a mistake. You made a choice. You threw me away for a cheap thrill, and now you can live with it." She sobbed harder, clutching at my hands, but I pulled them away. "Finally," she whispered, "can you at least help me? Just until I get back on my feet. Please, I have nothing." That was when I smiled. Not out of joy, but out of finality. "I'll help you," I said. Her eyes lit up with hope. "But not in the way you think." A week later, I made a massive donation to a domestic violence shelter and a local children's charity. Both donations were made publicly, and both were made in her name. The announcements went viral. Generous contribution by wife's name, except she hadn't given a dime, and everyone knew it. People praised her selflessness, but she couldn't touch a penny of it. She was forced to smile through clenched teeth as people congratulated her on being so charitable, when in reality she was scrambling to pay her own rent. It was the ultimate humiliation. She asked me for money, and I gave it away in her name. Thought that would be the end. But last night, around midnight, I heard pounding on my front door again, louder this time, angry. When I looked through the peephole, there she was, makeup streaked, hair a mess, screaming my name. She begged, she cursed, she cried, she threatened, she alternated between apologies and insults. Neighbors peeked out of their windows, watching the spectacle. I didn't open the door. I just stood there, watching silently until she finally noticed me through the peephole. Her eyes locked on mine, desperate. I spoke loud enough for her to hear. Just one final sentence. "This is the last time you'll ever stand at my door." Then I turned off the lights and walked away. Final update: it's been several months since my last update, and a lot has happened. For those of you who've been following this roller coaster, this will probably be the last time I write about it. The story isn't about her anymore. It's about me moving forward. The divorce is finalized. It took longer than I expected, mostly because she fought tooth and nail to try to squeeze every penny she could out of me. But at the end of the day, the prenup held strong. Everything I had before the marriage remained mine. The judge looked over the paperwork, saw the receipts, and essentially told her, "You're lucky you're walking away with anything at all." She got a small settlement. Barely enough to cover a few months of rent and groceries. No shares, no cars, no luxury trips, no lavish lifestyle. The woman who once strutted around as the queen of high society walked out of that courtroom with nothing more than a battered purse and a broken pride. Her lover? Completely gone. Word is he left the company not long after I pulled my shares. He burned every bridge he had trying to chase status and money, and when both dried up, so did his appeal. Last I heard, he's bouncing between odd consulting jobs, bragging less and drinking more. As for her reputation, shattered. The same friends and co-workers who once fawned over her now avoid her like the plague. When her lies about me unraveled, she was exposed for what she truly was: manipulative, entitled, and faithless. She became the cautionary tale whispered about at dinner parties. I didn't need to keep pushing. She collapsed all on her own. People occasionally send me updates about her, though I never ask. From what I've been told, she's living in a small one-bedroom apartment on the other side of the city. No more designer clothes, no more flashy cars. She's been spotted working at a low-end retail job, clocking in long shifts just to pay rent. I should feel pity, maybe. A part of me, the part that once loved her, probably does. But it's buried under layers of betrayal and humiliation. She made her choices, and those choices caught up to her. As for me, I'm thriving. Pulling my shares out turned out to be one of the best business decisions I ever made. My company is stronger than ever, with new partners and new ventures that are already paying off. The stress that used to eat at me is gone. I sleep better. I laugh more. I actually feel free. I've traveled more in the past few months than I did in the last 5 years combined. From Europe to Asia to the quiet beaches I never had time to visit before, I've rediscovered what it feels like to live life on my own terms. I've met new people, made new friends, and built connections that aren't based on money or status, but on who I am as a person. Am I in a new relationship? Not yet. But for the first time in a long time, I'm open to it. And this time, I'll choose someone who values me, not what I can give them. And then, as life loves to do, it handed me one last moment of closure. A few weeks ago, I was grabbing coffee downtown before a meeting. I wasn't thinking about her, wasn't expecting anything, just standing in line like any other day. When I turned around, there she was, my ex-wife. For a moment, it felt surreal. She looked so different. Not in the superficial sense, though the expensive clothes and jewelry were gone. No, it was in her eyes. They weren't the eyes of the confident woman who once laughed at me outside a party. They were the eyes of someone broken, someone who had been living in the wreckage of their own decisions. She froze when she saw me. Then, almost instinctively, she gave me a small, hesitant smile. "Hi," she whispered. I looked at her for a moment. No anger, no hatred, just nothing. She had no power over me anymore. I nodded politely, turned back to collect my coffee, and walked out. I didn't say a word. That silence said everything. Looking back, the best revenge wasn't the money. It wasn't canceling the party, pulling my shares, or exposing her lies. It wasn't the public humiliation or even the fact that she ended up with nothing. The best revenge was walking away. For years, I tied my worth to someone who never valued me. I sacrificed time, energy, and love for a person who only saw me as a wallet and a safety net. And when she finally showed me her true colors, I thought it would destroy me. But it didn't. It set me free. So if you take anything from my story, let it be this. Sometimes the greatest power you have is not in fighting back, but in letting go. Not with rage, not with vengeance, but with indifference. Because at the end of the day, I didn't need to destroy her. She destroyed herself, and I'm finally free. The best revenge wasn't the money or the humiliation. It was walking away, free of someone who never valued me.